I often find myself in the throes of work, preparing for the high holy days or another getting to know you dinners. And sometimes I pause and think to myself, how on earth did I get here? And then I always give a little chuckle and carry on. It's such a strange thing to ask oneself, because I often feel like we push ourselves to live in the present or focus on the future, and not always on the small, seemingly insignificant details that bring us exactly to where we are. But if I allow my mind to wander and indulge that little chuckle, this is where it goes. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, amid a mishmash of Jewish traditions. My grandfather, a Holocaust survivor, no longer believed in God, but he understood the importance of being Jewish, of tradition. We belonged to the synagogue my parents both grew up and were married in. It was a traditional congregation, a blend of both conservative and Orthodox traditions, conservadox, if you will. Thinking back on it, and with my current knowledge of how synagogue congregations typically look, I realize how bizarre it truly was. Every Shabbat morning, there were two services, one in the chapel that the Black Hatters attended with separate seating, and the more liberal service in the main sanctuary with mixed seating in the front and separate seating for men and women in the back. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever seen another synagogue quite like it. I loved that synagogue and the old shul ladies who would dote on me and pinch my cheeks until they were bright red. I have fond memories of the children running around the halls while our parents prayed, especially during Yizkor on Yom Kippur, which felt like a forbidden service for children. But at the same time, I never really fit in with my peers. I was an outsider. My parents had moved to the suburbs, and I was the only Jewish kid in my entire school. Everyone else my age went to the same school near the synagogue and thus formed stronger bonds with one another. My move away sent me on another path, which is something I have often taken for granted during my years in New York City. I became the other. Much like every kid, I just wanted to fit in. I hated being the other and let my religious practice slip to spend time with my non-Jewish friends and to assimilate more into their communities. I began to loathe attending Hebrew school and distanced myself from my fellow Hebrew school classmates. After my bat mitzvah, I continued on in Hebrew school only so I could go on the 10th grade Israel trip, a trip that would ultimately change my life. Studies have shown that a multi-week experience in Israel during high school has a profound impact on the development of long-term Jewish identity, and I attribute that experience to where I am today. Well, that and pure dumb luck. After that trip, my love of Israel bloomed. But I really only liked that I was Jewish because of the connection it gave me with Israel. I fell in love with the country, the way Judaism just simply existed as the status quo, as normal, and I yearned for that connection back in the States. My initial experience in Israel occurred when I was 17, and then a few years later, I studied abroad at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, which solidified my Jewish identity and bolstered my appreciation of its traditions. But honestly, I hated attending services, finding them inaccessible and dull, especially if the tunes were unfamiliar, and the general feeling of being on the outside, especially with my peers in my synagogue community. It is absolutely ironic then that the synagogue I grew up in approached me to be their part-time youth director, and I, a recent college graduate, immediately accepted. It was my first foray into the professional Jewish world. I didn't know it then, but that position planted the seed for my love of community building through a Jewish lens. But something new was coming. The number one question people ask me when they find out that I left Denver for New York City is, why would you ever leave Colorado? The truth is, like many of you, I've always loved this city, and it was my dream to live here, to be a Brooklyn girl. Randomly, on a hot summer day in 2011, a friend who I met during my study abroad contacted me to tell me she had a job for me at a prestigious synagogue on Manhattan's Upper West Side. A month later, I started my position at Congregation Road of Shalom. I really, truly did not want to continue working at a synagogue, but I figured, hey, it will get me to the place of my dreams. I can work there for a few months and find something else that will satisfy me. Little did I know, but that position would change my life. I ended up falling in love with Reform Judaism. It embraced everyone. It didn't just accept people as they were, it met them where they were and brought them into the fold. I found that working on programs that brought people together, no matter the amount of stress, hair pulling, or anxiety leading up to it, always filled me with immense satisfaction and joy. I was doing work that mattered. I was bringing people together. It's perhaps not the most interesting journey, but it always takes me by surprise whenever I consider how I have arrived here. Arrived to be a part of this congregation, a part of this little piece of Reformed Jewish life in Brooklyn. And honestly, I can't imagine more rewarding work or a better way to express my Judaism and Jewish identity than here with all of you. You have made this city, this synagogue, my home, and I love you all dearly. I can't wait until we are all physically together again. But in the meantime, my calling is to bring us together in profound ways virtually, caring for each other in this community that I have come to love so much.